Hello dear students, welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. So today is 9th of April and in today's lecture we will be discussing a few important and most relevant news articles from both the Hindu and Indian Express newspaper. So before discussing those important news articles, let's try to solve yesterday's practice question. So the question was, which of the following statements accurately describes crop diversification? Now in this context, what exactly is the crop diversification? Crop diversification is regularly changing the crops and the cropping patterns alternatively in a same piece of land. In fact, crop diversification is very often associated with increasing the fertility of the soils and also increasing the overall productivity, and it will also reduces the usage of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, so thereby a lesser input usage for the farmers, and at the same time the farmers are also getting higher productivity. So crop diversification is actually one of the natural methods of increasing the fertility of the soil. So in this context, the crop diversification, there are four options given. So crop diversification refers to the practice of cultivating a single crop variety throughout the year. So this is not correct, because the first statement actually is similar to the monocropping practices, cultivating only one single crop throughout the year. Second statement says crop diversification involves the cultivation of multiple crops on a rotating basis within a farming system. Yes, statement B is correct, and it is one of the most appropriate statement which is related to the crop diversification. So correct answer for this question is option B. Okay, so if you look at the statement, see, crop diversification primarily focuses on maximizing the yield of a single cash crop. So it will not focus on a single cash crop, rather whether it is food crop or cash crop, multiple crops can be cultivated in a same piece of land or on a rotating basis. So therefore C is also not correct. Option D, crop diversification is only beneficial for large-scale commercial farmers or farms. It is also not correct, because crop diversification can be practiced even in a small-scale lands also. So correct answer for this question is option B. Now in this context, please understand what exactly is the crop diversification. So crop diversification refers to a shift of a crop or a cropping system to another crop or a cropping system. Now I can tell you the example. First, rice is being cultivated, and after rice, majority of the farmers cultivate pulses, because these pulses fix nitrogen in the soil and naturally increases the soil fertility, thereby getting a better productivity in the next crop. So this is actually crop diversification, cultivating multiple crops on a rotating basis to increase the soil fertility of the soil is the correct answer, right? So in this context, use of resources in a best possible way by changing and modifying the spatial and temporal crop and the cropping activities. In fact, a shift from a less profitable and sustainable crop or cropping system to a more profitable and sustainable cropping system actually involves the crop diversification. So on the other hand, what are the other benefits with respect to crop diversification? It holds or it provides various other benefits also. So it increases the crop production by 14%. And secondly, it will also reduce the pest attack and diseases by 63%. Similarly, the water quality will be improved by 50%, and that will also reduces the water stress in the agriculture sector. And apart from that, the soil quality will also be improved by the diversification of various other crops. So ultimately, it ensures food security for our populations. So this is why crop diversification is very important. So the next important practice question for today. So please answer this question in the comment section, because we have already discussed what constitutes gray hydrogen, what is brown hydrogen, and blue hydrogen and green hydrogen. Now green hydrogen is also very often in use. So please try to answer this question in the comment section. So which of the following statements about green hydrogen are true? Statement 1 says that green hydrogen is produced by using fossil fuels. And statement B says green hydrogen production emits a large amount of greenhouse gases. Statement C, green hydrogen is generated through electrolysis powered by the renewable energy sources. Option D, green hydrogen is primarily sourced from natural gas extraction. So please try to answer this question in the comment section, because hydrogen is very important fuel, because especially for a country like India, where we are looking to make a transition from a fossil fuel based economy to a green economy based on renewable fuels such as green hydrogen. So therefore try to answer this question. And before proceeding into the discussion of all important news articles, please try to subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button, so that we can come up with more such innovative classes that will be helpful for you in your preparation. So let's try to discuss the first very important news article. So this is with respect to recent Supreme Court's judgment on citizens' right against the climate change. Earlier also we have discussed that climate change no doubt is a concern, and it has been impacting the human populations as well as the wildlife also. So the better example for wildlife getting affected by the climate change is the Great Indian Bustard. Great Indian Bustard populations are getting affected by the climate change and increasing the anthropogenic activities in its habitat, because the Great Indian Bustard habitat led to extinction of this bird species. Okay, so it is already a critically endangered bird species in India. Now, not just that, but climate change has also having a lot of negative impact on the human beings, and especially among the poor people, those who are poor, those people who are actually living in the urban slums. So they are facing a lot of challenges with respect to the climate change, and they are more vulnerable and more prone to the climate change. Now in this context, recently Supreme Court has observed that this is not with respect to sorry about that. Okay, so this is not with respect to climate change. We have already discussed in previous classes. Really sorry. So several states are coming to court against the center. Okay, so several states are coming to court against the center. So this essentially in the context of recently, in fact, several states have been filing petitions in the Supreme Court. Why they are filing petitions in the Supreme Court? Because they feel that the center has been encroaching upon the domains of the respective state governments. Okay, so the center has been encroaching upon the domains of the state governments. For example, when I say state governments, Indian Constitution Schedule 7 has provided for 3 lists. Schedule 7 has provided for 3 lists. So one is central list, second concurrent list, and third is state list, right? So there are 3 lists where on the subjects in the central list, so the central legislation, the parliament can have the powers to make laws. However, with respect to subjects in the state list, the state legislature has all the powers to make laws on those subjects. For example, if I can tell you that healthcare and police and even agriculture are part of the state subjects. Okay, so examples of state subjects. However, when we talk about concurrent list, education is part of concurrent list, forests are part of concurrent list, and when we talk about the central list, railways are an example of central list, and apart from railways, postal is part of the central list, defense is part of the central list, right? So the central government or the union parliament have the exclusive domain over the subjects which are mentioned in these various lists. However, when we talk about the concurrent list, on the subjects in the concurrent list, both the union legislature as well as the state legislature have the powers to make or laws on those subjects. For example, on education, on subjects like forest, because when we talk about the central and state legislation making laws on the concurrent list subject, so in case a clash or a conflict between central and state government over which law should prevail in the country, because on the concurrent list subjects both central and state governments can pass legislations. Now in this context, the central legislation would prevail. The central legislation would prevail over the, or it is supreme over the state legislature on the state law on the subjects which are mentioned in the concurrent list. However, not just that, recently the Citizenship Amendment Act, where states like Kerala have gone to the Supreme Court about the center, and after that the functioning of the governor, the issue of governor, where Tamil Nadu has gone to the Supreme Court to make sure that the governor follows the elected government, the directions of the elected government. And after that, even the Union Territory of Delhi is also very often approached the Supreme Court, the way a lieutenant governor has been functioning and the way central government has been controlling the elected government in Delhi. So after that, there is also a tussle over the fiscal federalism. Fiscal federalism means that states like Karnataka have been claiming that even though they are contributing more taxes to the central government, but the share of taxes from the state to the from the central government to these states is very less when we compare it with their overall contribution. So because of that reason, these states are very often going to the Supreme Court against the central government and what central government has been doing as something which is against the fiscal, not just against the fiscal but also against the federal feature of Indian Constitution. Now in this context, a division bench of the Supreme Court has recently said that it has recently observed that various state governments are actually directly approaching the top court, and they are also seeking the top court to provide reliefs while there should be no contest between the center and states. Okay, so various state governments are actually approaching the Supreme Court against the central government. Okay, so this was the context, and this is what the Supreme Court has said. Supreme Court has said that several states are coming to court against the center. Now, what are the major reasons behind increasing tussle between the center and state governments? So it is very important and essential for us to understand the key reasons for the tussle. So first and foremost, the central government is very often encroaching upon the domain of the respective state governments. For example, if I can tell you, agriculture is a state subject, and the Union Parliament has passed 3 legislations in the year 2020 and 21 with respect to agriculture, but agriculture is in the state subject, or it is in the state list. So therefore, the Union government has been encroaching upon the interesting areas. Okay, so for example, areas of governance which are actually essentially local in nature. So local in nature in the sense that they come under the purview of the respective state governments and state legislatures. And the union government has been increasingly encroaching upon the local governments, or increasingly encroaching upon the domains of the respective state governments, because the union government wanted to establish a greater connection with the people, but it is not under the legislative domain or under the executive power of the union to encroach upon the powers of the respective state governments. So if I can tell you one example with respect to this, we all knew that health is being a state subject. So despite health a state subject, the recent announcement by the center to provide food grains to nearly 80 crore people is clearly part of this trend. Now we can say that this is not a perfect example for the encroachment of the center into the local domain of the respective state governments, but there are a lot of examples where the center has been clearly encroaching upon into the powers of the state governments and state legislatures. Now if the center has been exercising the unlimited power in this respect, then there is no point setting up a federal form of government in India. because you are further marginalizing the powers of the respective state governments. And federalism has provided for their respective domains, executive domain, legislative domain. So you have to work within your domains, and that is the essence of federal form of polity. However, if you encroach upon the domains of the respective state governments, that is in fact against the federal polity that the Indian Constitution has adopted. So similarly, in recent times, we have been observing the gradual encroachment by the center in states' domain. Okay, for example, through direct funding and through direct policy implementation and leading changes in service delivery and credit attribution. Okay, so the government of India is more involved directly in these states' subjects. So actually, it means that I've already told you that we are living in a federal polity where the state list has provided for certain subjects where the state governments have a lot of powers with respect to these subjects. But now the center has been clearly encroaching upon the domain of the respective state governments, and that is against the federal polity of the Indian Constitution. And this is where the center first consult with the respective state governments and should go ahead, because if any subject is in the state list, for example, health is in the state list, and earlier example we have told that the center has come up with a policy of providing food grains to the 80 crore people in the country. So this is a necessity, and state governments may not have the capacity to provide food grains for the people, but here the center has directly involved providing food grains, and it is considered as one of the social development measure, and such measures are in fact need to the center's involvement in ensuring that such welfare programs or welfare schemes reach to every section in every state governments. So therefore center's intervention is needed, but in this context cooperative federalism must be emphasized. Okay, so cooperative federalism is very important. So before announcing any such policy, before providing funding for these programs, the center must consult with the respective state governments, and that is in line with the cooperative federalism and collaborative federalism. Because see, cooperative federalism and collaborative federalism has a lot of scope and potential where center and state governments can work together to address major challenges that we have been facing. And in fact, education and healthcare are the state subjects. Okay, so education and healthcare, they are not state subjects, education and healthcare. So both are primary responsibility of the states and both encroached upon by the center. Okay, so here, if I am not wrong, education is in the concurrent list. Education is not in the a state list, but healthcare is in the state list. So here the center government can make interventions with respect to education. There is no doubt about that, because since it is in the concurrent list, the central government equally have the domain to intervene with respect to education. Okay, so the central government can also make policies. However, whenever there is any subject which is in the state list, then the center should not directly involve in either bringing any policy or implementation of any of the subject or making any laws. Rather, it requires the support of the state governments, and that is the essence of the cooperative federalism. So after that, in recent times, there is also another issue, that is fiscal centralization. So fiscal centralization is concentration of more and more financial powers with respect to the state government. So in fact, the goods and services tax, the GST, was also criticized of furthering the fiscal concentration or fiscal centralization, the centralization of powers, the fiscal powers with the central government. Okay, so in this context, the unequal distribution of the financial resources between the states and center, coupled with center's increasing control over the tax revenues, and that has fueled disputes with respect to the fiscal autonomy of the states. Now, if you look at the center and states separately, so here the greater responsibility of the people who are living within a state is falls on the respective state governments. However, the central governments very often have the lesser responsibility. So the state governments have to spend more fiscal resources or financial resources for the development of different sections. But when the central government has been centralizing the fiscal powers, the central government is having more fiscal powers, how can these state governments can spend resources for the development of the people? And that is also an issue. And recent goods and services tax reform is also criticized by several state governments because it was seen by those state governments as an attempt for fiscal centralization. And after that, we should also talk about a lot of policy conflicts also. Okay, so divergent political ideologies and policy priorities. For example, different states have different political parties. So that we can say that divergent political ideologies and policy priorities in different political parties in different states are also one of the reason for increasing the states increasingly approaching the Supreme Court over the central government. Okay, so there are a lot of disagreements over the implementation of national policies at the regional level. For example, Tamil Nadu state government clearly says that they will not implement new national education policy. Okay, so these are different reasons that led to increasingly adopting the state governments the route to approach the Supreme Court. Okay, so state governments have been increasingly adopting or increasingly going to Supreme Court against the center. So in fact, the Supreme Court has called this trend as unhealthy trend. Because in a federal polity like India, it is generally expected that both center and state governments can go hand in hand. They can collaborate with each other. They can cooperate with each other. But cooperative federalism has been becoming the conflictual federalism. There will be always a conflict between the center and state governments, two or more state governments. So that is not symbolizes or signifies the healthy federal government or federal polity. So therefore, we must emphasize on cooperative and collaborative federalism, and in this context, there are a lot of measures that are need to be taken. So firstly, the center must maintain the monopoly of the national agenda. Okay, so the center must make sure that at the national level it should focus on all essential and all important issues, whether social, economic, political, so all those issues. Okay, and in fact security also. And there are some subjects or some issues they must be left to the respective state governments by the center. So there will not be any encroachment or any interference by the center over the subjects of state governments. Secondly, it is also suggested that the concurrent list must be dismantled, or at least the size of the concurrent list or the number of subjects in the concurrent list must be reduced. And in fact, we should look for empowering the local governments. So remember, local governments were established in India under 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts. So rather than concentration and centralization of powers, we need to devolve more and more powers to these local bodies as envisioned in Article 40 DPSPs of the Indian Constitution. So apart from that, there were a number of committees which have actually recommended the decentralization, delegation and devolution of more and more powers either to local bodies or to the state governments. For example, when we talk about the Rajamanar Commission on Center-State Relations and Sarkaria Commission on the and the Administrative Reforms Commission, so they have actually reported that the Interstate Council on Center-State Relations. So in this context, they have recommended that there is a need for the decentralization, and they also recommended to establish an interstate council. So that interstate council will ensure the cooperative and collaborative federalism between the center and state governments, and that could reduce the number of conflicts or issues between these two types of government. However, there is also a modern approach that Indian polity actually demands a modern approach to transformation. So the modern approach include induction of efficiency, accountability, and an outcome orientation. Okay, so this is a modern approach which can be part of the center-state relations. Ultimately, we should focus on healthy center-state relations. Healthy center-state relations can be achieved through cooperative, collaborative, and competitive federalism. So this spirit must be inculcated in different tiers of the government. And secondly, we should talk about Schedule 7 of the Indian Constitution. As I have already told you that Schedule 7 consists of 3 important lists. So central list. Union government could legislate on items given in the central list, and followed by that there is also a state list. Similar to the central list, in state list also the state government can have the legislative powers over the subjects in the state list. And concurrent list, both both center and state can legislate on the subjects which are in the concurrent list. However, in this context, the central legislation has the overriding powers over the respective state government. For example, imagine on the subject called forest, and which is in the concurrent law, and both center and state governments have made laws with respect to the forest, and which law would prevail? The law which is being made by the center would prevail in case of any conflict or any tussle between the central law and state law on the concurrent list subject. So this is what the Supreme Court has said in one of its judgment. So the law which is being made by the central government would prevail in case of a clash between the central legislation and state legislation with respect to the concurrent list subject. Okay, so in fact, the number of subjects in the concurrent list and also in the union list has been increasing, and that is a concern, because when number of subjects in the concurrent list and the union list increases, that increasingly marginalizes the powers of the respective state governments. So under the 42nd Amendment to the Constitution, 5 subjects including education, forest for transport to the concurrent list from the state list. So earlier they were under the state list, education, forest, and 3 more subjects. Okay, so earlier they were under the state list, and from the state list they were transferred into the concurrent list, thereby restricting the powers of the respective state governments or state legislatures. So this is how the states have been going to the Supreme Court against the center. So next important news article, so this we have already discussed. So this is with respect to citizens' rights against the climate change. Okay, so citizens have the right against climate change. In fact, one of its judgment, the Supreme Court has interpreted that citizens' right against climate change is actually part of Article 21, right to life, and Article 14 of the Indian Constitution. Okay, so this is right to life and right to equality, Article 14 of the Indian Constitution. So in India, if you look at the impacts of climate change, as I have already told you in the beginning of the lecture, that poor people are impacted by the climate change. So they are mostly impacted by the negative effects of climate change. They are more vulnerable and they are more prone to the negative consequences of climate change. So therefore, the Supreme Court has said that it is the government's responsibility to transform towards renewables. Don't use the fossil fuels or reduce the usage of fossil fuels, because that would reduces the climate change, global warming, pollution in urban areas, so thereby better standard of living for the people. So this is what the Supreme Court has said. So Supreme Court of India has emphasized on the need to protect lives and livelihoods. Okay, so for example, if I can say that climate change is actually responsible for increasing the intensity and frequency of heat waves across the country. So because of increasing intensity and frequency of these heat waves, the productivity of the labor would generally declines or reduces. So that impacts his livelihoods. And if it is a severe heat wave, so that can also pose significant harm to the health of the workers. So it is not just with the case of heat waves, but say several other disasters that are being associated with the climate change. Okay, so the Supreme Court has actually emphasized on there is a need to protect lives and livelihoods in the face of the climate change, and framing it within the context of the fundamental rights enshrined in the Indian Constitution. So we all know that Indian Constitution Part 3 talks about the fundamental rights of citizens. Right. So recognition of fundamental rights, the Supreme Court has recognized that in fact the Supreme Court has interpreted that the right to equality under Article 14 and right to life and personal liberty under Article 21, so they are being violated. Okay, so when the state governments has not been taking enough measures with respect to tackling climate change, so therefore the Supreme Court has emphasized on these two rights against the climate change, and also stressing on the importance of climate change on the lives of the people and their livelihoods. And in fact the Supreme Court has also urged the government to take urgent action to mitigate the impact of climate change, citing the growing evidence of vulnerabilities, climate related risks such as floods, heat waves, changing rainfall patterns. So we have all seen how climate change has impacting the lives and livelihoods of the people. So the cyclone intensity and frequency has been increasing both in the Bay of Bengal and in the Arabian Sea, and the coastal areas are being flooded, and the agriculture is being impacted by climate change, and pollution has become most worsen. It has become more worsen compared to the earlier times. So therefore all these factors are majorly attributed or associated with the climate change. So because of that reason, the Supreme Court has said that climate change is actually violating Article 14 and Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. In fact, the Supreme Court has also called for specific action to address climate change. So the court's verdict underscores the importance of addressing climate change, so that could ensure the realization of the fundamental rights of Article 14 and Article 21. Okay, so in fact right to a clean environment and right to health are actually part of the Indian Constitution, Article 21 of the fundamental rights. So this is what the Supreme Court has said with respect to the right against climate change, because we know that Article 21 is known as a broader right. There are several other rights which are already included in the Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Okay, so in fact the environmental concerns and policy action. So there is no concerted action against the changing climate or environmental degradation from the government side. So we can say that in a nutshell, there is no political will. There is no political will on the part of the government to address the climate change. Okay, so despite having a lot of evidence of environmental degradation, so that we have been observing in everyday lives, the climate change impacts, the political class actually show a limited attention to these ecological issues, especially in election years. So there is a very less or limited attention to these issues. So thereby the Supreme Court has said that there will be a larger attention required to address the negative impacts of climate change. So the next important news article, it says that there is a strong link between high glycemic index diet and diabetes, says a study. Now in this context we will understand what exactly is this news article. So the findings of an international study, so that has been suggesting that consuming low glycemic index or low glycemic load diets might prevent the development of type 2 diets. Okay, so if you can consume low glycemic load diets, so that might prevent the development of diabetes too. So we will understand what is diabetes. So firstly, just look at the image that there are certain foods which are low GI foods. For example, if you eat these low GI foods, you will be protected from the diabetes 2 type 2 diabetes. Okay, so there are certain foods like fruits, grains, lentils, non-starchy vegetables, legumes, dairy products and brown rice. So if you eat such foods which are having low glycemic content, so you will be protected from type 2 diabetes. Okay, so you can prevent the development of type 2 diabetes. So on the other hand, there are certain high glycemic index foods. So they include sugar, sweetened drinks, and white polished rice, potatoes, and white bread. So if you eat those breads, there is a higher risk of you there is a higher risk of development of type 2 diabetes. So this particular survey has also found a strong association between the glycemic index and the risk of type 2 diabetes. For example, if you eat these foods, there is a higher risk of development of type 2 diabetes. So among individuals with a higher body mass index. Okay, so higher body mass index actually means that a higher weight, people with the higher weight. So what is this glycemic index? So glycemic index ranks the carbohydrate containing foods. For example, if you look at potato, so potato has the higher glycemic index because it contains a lot of carbohydrate. So GI ranks the carbohydrate containing foods based on blood glucose response. So what is the blood glucose response after you eating such foods or after a meal? So if there is a higher blood sugar reading, the higher will be the glycemic index. And secondly, there will be a glycemic load. So glycemic load on the other hand is both the quality and quantity of the carbohydrate in a specific food. So that is the glycemic load. And it is the product of glycemic index and the amount of carbohydrate available in a serving. And after that, there are certain high glycemic index foods. They include sugary foods and sugary soft drinks, white bread, potatoes, and white polished rice. So there are certain low and medium GI foods. So those GI foods are actually better good for health. So they reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes. Okay, so some fruit and vegetables, pulses, whole grain foods, and porridge oats, right? So these are the foods which are having a lesser amount of the glycemic index, so that are also helpful or beneficial for the health. Now in this context, we'll understand what exactly is diabetes. So diabetes is actually a non-communicable disease. So diabetes is a non-communicable disease. So this occurs either when the pancreas does not produce enough insulin. So in case if the pancreas has not produced enough insulin, insulin is actually a hormone that regulates the blood sugar levels. Okay, so or it could reduce or control the glucose in the blood. So when the body cannot effectively use the insulin it produces. Okay, please understand, diabetes is a non-communicable disease. So non-communicable disease means it is not contagious in nature, and diabetes will not spread from one individual to the another individual. So if you look at tuberculosis spreads from one person to another person. So it is contagious in nature. But these non-communicable diseases like diseases like diabetes are actually non-contagious in nature. They are non-communicable in nature. So the diabetes takes place, or diabetes occurs when pancreas is not able to produce enough insulin. Okay, so when pancreas is not able to produce the enough insulin, so in that case the diabetes would be a common or a normal phenomenon. And even in case the body does not effectively use the existing insulin also, so that will lead to a phenomenon called diabetes, a health problem called diabetes. So in fact, insulin is known as a peptide hormone. Okay, so it is a peptide hormone, and that is being produced by beta cells of pancreatic islets. So in fact, it is considered to be the main anabolic hormone of the body, and there are two types of diabetes, type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes is an age related, and it often develops at the age of 45 and beyond. Okay, so type 2 diabetes develops at the age of 45 and beyond. So when we talk about the type 1 diabetes, it is largely genetic in nature. Okay, type 1 diabetes is largely genetic in nature, while type 2 diabetes depends on lifestyle of the individual. So in case if there are mutations, or in case any genetically genetic problem among individuals, so that causes type 1 diabetes. So next important news article is with respect to the voter verifiable paper audit trial. We all know about the electronic voting machines. So for better voting, the Election Commission of India has introduced these electronic voting machines. So these electronic voting machines cannot be tampered. They cannot be tampered, and at the same time they are more efficient in casting vote and also calculating the votes, and it would also significantly reduces a lot of malpractices that are taking place in the elections. So it will prevent the booth capturing. Okay, so it will prevent the booth capturing and any other manipulation in the voting. However, in recent times there are a lot of political parties which are raising concerns on the electronic voting machines. So these electronic voting machines are remotely controlled. So one of the allegations was from the political parties is that these electronic voting machines are remotely controlled by the ruling parties. So they are inherently benefiting the ruling parties in power. So in order to address the fears of the opposition political parties, the Election Commission has come up with voter verifiable paper audit trial. So we will understand what exactly is this voter verifiable paper audit trial briefly. So this is VVPAT machine. So why it is in use? It is in use because recently the Supreme Court has sought the response from the Election Commission of India. Okay, so not just the Election Commission of India, and it also sought response from the central government with respect to the comprehensive count on the voter verifiable paper audit trial slips in elections. Okay, now every polling booth will have an EVM machine and will also have the voter verifiable paper audit trial. So this is EVM machine. Now when you cast your vote in an EVM machine, then the paper voter verifiable paper audit trial, it shows you a slip from here. A slip is being generated. Okay, so a slip is being generated. In that slip you can clearly see to which party you have voted or to which candidate you have voted, and it will also shows the symbol to which you have cast cast your vote. Okay, so however you cannot access the slip. This slip automatically falls into this particular box. However, only the election officials can access these slips. So these slips would further minimize the malpractices or any allegations on EVMs by the opposition political parties. However, if any political party claims that malpractice has taken place with respect to the EVMs, then a few selected or random VVPAT machines would be opened, and the total votes polled in the EVM machine and total number of slips would be matched. Okay, so total number of slips and the total votes polled or recorded by the EVM machine would be matched to alleviate the fears of the respective political parties. Now understand, so the voter verifiable paper audit trial was introduced in the year 2014 in the Lok Sabha elections. So it is actually an independent system that consists of two parts. So they include the voter verifiable paper audit trial printer and voter verifiable paper audit trial status display unit. So this is the status display unit and the VVPAT printer also. Okay, so it consists of two different parts or two different units, and these two different units are actually attached to the electronic voting machine. So this allows, the VVPAT machine actually allows the voters to verify their votes and verify their votes are cast as intended. For example, imagine I'm being a voter and I go to a polling station and I cast my vote to a respective political party. But I don't know that I feel like the EVM machine is being manipulated. I cast vote to a political party called A, but I felt like the vote is being recorded as I've casted vote to political party B, but I wanted to cast my vote to political party A. Now immediately the VVPAT plays a role here. Now I can look at VVPAT because VVPAT shows a slip to me. So that slip includes to which candidate I have voted and to which symbol I have cast my vote. Okay, so this is the utility, but you cannot access this paper slip. It is just displayed to you and you can just confirm yourself that the vote is casted to a right person, that is a political party or a candidate A. So that is the utility of a voter verifiable paper audit trail. So when vote is cast, the slip is printed containing serial number. Okay, so and it also contains name and the symbol of the candidate, and it remains exposed for the period of for the time for 7 seconds in a transparent window. See, you can see here this is a transparent window, and in this transparent window this slip is visible for around 7 seconds. So I can clearly see to which candidate I have cast my vote. I cast my vote to which candidate. So thereafter this printed slip automatically gets cut and falls into a sealed drop box of the voter verifiable paper audit trail. Okay, so this is the utility. Actually it prevents the electoral malpractices in the election process. Okay, so the results of EVMs can be verified using the slips kept in the drop boxes at the VVPAT machines. Okay, so how VVPAT is used for the verification. Okay, so please understand the results of EVMs. The total number of votes recorded in these EVMs are being verified with the total number of slips in the VVPAT machine or VVPAT drop boxes to come at a conclusion that there was no electoral malpractice took place. So VVPAT can be accessed by the polling officials, but they cannot be accessed by the normal or general voters. So in fact, these paper slips are deemed to be more authoritative than the EVM tallies. Okay, so compared to the EVM, these VVPAT slips are more authoritative. Now the political parties will tell you that. So EVM tallies in case where VVPAT slips are utilized to verify the votes, because the VVPAT slips are very often used to verify the votes polled in a particular polling booth or in a constituency. However, the voter verification is only done in extreme circumstances. Not every time the slips in the VVPAT will be used for matching the votes in the EVM and VVPAT slips. Only in extreme circumstances the slips would be brought out and they will be matched with the EVM machines. Okay, so in case there are any accusations of fraud or miscalculation took place, then only the slips in the EVPAT will be brought out and they will be matched with the EVM machines. So the Election Commission of India has the authority to request that votes be verified using the VVPAT slips in response to any such complaints with respect to accusations of fraud and miscalculation. So in fact, at that moment, the VVPAT slips are counted in a randomly selected polling stations. Only few or randomly selected polling stations where these malpractices usually takes place, whether it is an assembly constituency or a parliamentary constituency. So that is depending upon the nature of the elections being held. Okay, based on the nature of elections. However, if you talk about the VVPAT machines, these VVPAT machines are manufactured by Electronics Corporation of India Limited plus Bharat Electronics Limited. So these two agencies, I'm repeating again, Electronics Corporation of India Limited and Bharat Electronics Limited, jointly designed and manufactured the voter verifiable paper audit trail. So these voter verifiable paper audit trail ensure the authenticity. They ensure the authenticity of the election, and at the same time they also prevent the electoral malpractices such as booth capturing in the polling stations. Okay, so they also significantly increases the trust of normal people along with the political parties also. Now the political parties have been demanding that, the opposition political parties have been demanding that in every constituency the VVPAT slips and total number of votes polled in these EVM machines must be matched. So for that particular purpose, they have gone to the Supreme Court and filed a petition, and Supreme Court in return sent notices to the Election Commission of India as well as the central government seeking their response on this. Okay, so that's all with respect to the Election Commission of India. Okay, so finally, thank you so much, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button, and tomorrow also we'll come up with more important news articles. Thank you.